Document. Part 1. The galaxy was quiet. Too quiet. The stars still burned brightly in the endless void, but their lights seemed dimmer now, like they were mourning something. For decades, humanity had reached for the stars, building colonies on distant planets, dreaming of a future where Earth wasn't the only home. But those dreams were fading fast. The Zanari Empire had swept through the galaxy like a storm, leaving destruction in its wake. Their ships were massive, their weapons unmatched, and their resolve unbreakable. One by one, human colonies fell, and no one could stop them. Captain Daniel Hayes sat alone in the dimly lit command chair of the Aurora, staring at the glowing screens before him. His ship was small, just a frigate, but it was all he had left. The Aurora wasn't sleek or shiny, like the newer models. Its hull was scarred with burn marks from countless battles, and its engines groaned under the strain of constant use. It was old, patched together with spare parts, scavenged from abandoned stations, but it was alive. And so was Daniel, though sometimes he wondered why. "Captain," a voice called out, breaking the silence. It was Lieutenant Rachel Morgan, the ship's chief engineer. She stood in the doorway of the bridge, her arms crossed. Her dark hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and there was grease smeared across her cheek. She looked tired, like everyone else on board. "We're approaching the edge of Zanari space. You should see this." Daniel nodded and stood up, his boots clinking softly against the metal floor. He followed Rachel to the main viewport, where the vast expanse of space stretched out before them. The view was breathtaking, as always, but today it carried an ominous weight. In the distance, the faint glow of a dying star illuminated a cluster of debris, what was left of a human colony. The wreckage floated silently, a graveyard of broken dreams. "They hit it hard," Rachel said, her voice low. "No survivors." Daniel didn't respond. He didn't need to. They both knew what it meant. The Zanari weren't just conquering worlds. They were erasing them. Every colony they destroyed was another piece of humanity wiped away, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. The United Earth Fleet had tried to fight back, throwing everything they had at the invaders, but it hadn't been enough. Now, all that remained were scattered remnants of resistance, fleeing deeper into the galaxy to avoid the same fate. "Any word from command?" Daniel asked, turning away from the VIEWPORT. Rachel shook her head. "Nothing new, just the usual orders. Stay clear of Zanari patrols. Keep moving. Don't engage." Daniel sighed and ran a hand through his short, graying hair. He hated those orders. Staying clear, keeping moving, it felt like running away. But what choice did they have? The Aurora wasn't built for direct combat. Its job was to escort refugee ships to safer zones, helping civilians escape the advancing Zanari forces. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was necessary. Still, every time he saw another colony reduced to rubble, he couldn't help but feel like he was failing. As if reading his thoughts, Rachel spoke up. "You can't save everyone, Captain. You know that?" "I know," Daniel replied, his voice heavy, "but it doesn't make it any easier." The two of them stood in silence for a moment, watching the debris drift past. Then Rachel cleared her throat and straightened up. "Anyway, we've got 3 refugee ships waiting to jump to the next sector. Ensign Carter says the coordinates are set. We're ready when you are." Daniel gave her a nod. "Good. Let's get them out of here." He turned and walked back to the command chair, settling into it with a weary sigh. The refugees depended on the Aurora to guide them safely through hostile territory, and Daniel took that responsibility seriously. He glanced at the crew, bustling around the bridge. They were a ragtag group, most of them young and inexperienced, but they worked well together. Ensign Noah Carter, the navigator, was barely out of training, but he had a knack for plotting efficient hyperspace routes. Lieutenant Morgan kept the engines running, despite all odds, and even the junior officers showed surprising resilience in the face of constant danger. Captain Noah called out, his voice tinged with excitement. Refugee ships are reporting green lights across the board, ready to jump on your mark. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. All right, everyone, let's move. Engage hyperdrive, on my signal. The crew sprang into action, fingers flying over control panels, as the Aurora prepared to lead the convoy to safety. Daniel watched the countdown timer tick down, his mind racing. Another day, another retreat. How long could they keep running? How many more colonies would fall before someone found a way to fight back? The thought lingered in his mind as the countdown reached 0. Engage, he said firmly. In an instant, the stars blurred into streaks of light as the Aurora and its convoy leaped into hyperspace. For now, they were safe. But Daniel knew it wouldn't last. Sooner or later, the Zanari would find them again, and when that happened, he wasn't sure how much longer humanity could hold on. Still, as the ship sped through the void, Daniel allowed himself a brief moment of hope. Hope that somewhere, somehow, there was a way to turn the tide. A way to stand up to the Zanari and say no. A way to prove that humanity wasn't ready to give up, not yet. For now, though, the Aurora would keep moving, carrying the fragile remnants of a species fighting to survive. And Daniel would keep leading, doing whatever it took to keep his crew and the people depending on them alive for one more day. Document Part 2. The hyperspace jump was smooth, almost eerily so. The Aurora emerged from the swirling tunnel of light into a quieter sector of space, far from the chaos of Zanari patrols. The 3 refugee ships followed closely behind, their blinking navigation lights visible on the monitors. For a moment, it felt like they were safe. But safety, Daniel knew, was an illusion in times like these. Status report, Daniel said as he stepped onto the bridge, his boots echoing softly on the metal floor. All systems nominal, Ensign Noah Carter replied, glancing up from his console. His young face lit up with a mix of pride and nervous energy. Refugee ships are holding formation. No signs of pursuit. Good, Daniel said, nodding. He turned to Lieutenant Rachel Morgan, who was already checking the engine diagnostics. How's the ship holding up? Rachel tapped a few commands on her screen before looking up. Her expression was calm, but wary. We're fine for now, but we're pushing the engines hard. Another jump like that, and we might start losing power. Daniel frowned. They couldn't afford to slow down, not with the Zanari closing in on every front. Still, he knew Rachel was right. The Aurora wasn't built for constant high-speed travel. It was only a matter of time before something gave out. Before he could respond, the communications panel beeped sharply. Everyone froze, their eyes darting toward the source of the sound. Incoming signals were rare in sectors like this, especially ones strong enough to cut through subspace interference. Patch it through, Daniel ordered, taking a step closer to the main console. Static crackled over the speakers, followed by a faint, distorted voice. To any Allied vessels. Urgently need assistance. Research Station Delta 7, under attack. Noah's fingers flew across his keyboard, trying to pinpoint the signal's origin. It's coming from a nearby system, he said quickly. About 2 hours away, at full burn. Daniel's jaw tightened. A research station under attack. That meant civilian scientists, engineers, maybe even families were in danger. But orders were clear. Avoid engagement at all costs. The Aurora's mission was to protect the refugees, not play hero. What do we do, Captain? Noah asked, his voice tinged with both hope and uncertainty. He looked up at Daniel, waiting for guidance. Rachel stepped forward, her arms crossed. We don't have the firepower to take on whoever's attacking them, even if it's just pirates. We're outgunned. We should stick to the plan and keep moving. Daniel didn't answer right away. He stared at the blinking coordinates on the screen, weighing the options. If they ignored the distress call, the people at the station would almost certainly die. But if they went to help, they risked putting the refugees and the entire crew of the Aurora, in harm's way. It was a no-win situation. We can't just leave them, Daniel said finally, his voice firm. Set a course for Delta 7, maximum speed. Rachel opened her mouth to protest, but one look at Daniel's face told her it was pointless. She sighed and nodded, turning back to her station. You're the captain, she muttered under her breath. The Aurora changed course, its engines roaring as it pushed toward the source of the signal. The refugee ships stayed behind, instructed to hold position until further notice. Daniel knew it was risky, leaving them unprotected, but he couldn't abandon the station without at least investigating. Something about the urgency in the distress call gnawed at him, like it wasn't just another random attack. 2 hours later, the Aurora dropped out of hyperspace near the research station. What they saw made everyone on the bridge freeze. The station, once a gleaming hub of scientific discovery, was now a crumbling wreck. Sections of its outer hull had been torn open, exposing the interior to the cold vacuum of space. Fires burned inside, casting flickering orange light through shattered windows. Debris floated around the station, remnants of smaller ships that had tried and failed to defend it. There's no sign of the attackers, Noah said, scanning the area. Whoever hit this place is long gone, or lying in wait, Rachel added grimly. Daniel ignored her warning, for now. Hail the station. See if anyone's still alive. Noah adjusted the frequency, sending out a broadband transmission. After a few tense moments, a weak voice crackled through the speakers. Hear us, please. Help. Station Delta 7. This is Captain Daniel Hayes of the Aurora. We're here to assist. Can you confirm your status? More static? Then, a shaky reply. Captain. Thank God. This is Dr. Emily Blake. I'm the only one left, I think. Please, hurry. Daniel exchanged a glance with Rachel. Prepare a shuttle team. We're going in. The shuttle ride to the station was quiet, filled with unspoken tension. Daniel, Rachel, and 2 security officers strapped themselves in as the small craft docked with what remained of the station's airlock. Inside, the scene was devastating. The corridors were dark, lit only by emergency lights that cast eerie shadows on the walls. The air smelled of smoke and burnt metal, and the floor was littered with debris. They found Dr. Emily Blake huddled in a corner of the main lab, clutching a datapad to her chest. She was pale and trembling, her lab coat singed and torn. When she saw them, relief washed over her face, but it was mixed with grief. You're too late, she whispered, her voice breaking. They killed everyone else, took what they wanted, and left. Who did this? Daniel asked gently, kneeling beside her. Was it the Zanari? Emily shook her head. Not directly. It was mercenaries, hired guns. But they were after something specific. She held up the datapad. This? Daniel took the device, studying it carefully. On the screen was an image of a strange object, a fragment of some kind, covered in intricate carvings. It looked ancient, alien. What is it? Rachel asked, peering over Daniel's shoulder. It's part of a weapon, Emily explained, her voice steadier now. An artifact from a civilization that existed long before humanity reached the stars. My team was studying it when the attack happened. Whoever sent those mercenaries wanted it badly. A weapon, Daniel repeated, frowning. What kind of weapon? I don't know all the details yet, Emily admitted, but the inscription suggests it has the ability to disrupt advanced technology, like the kind the Zanari use. If we can find the other pieces, we might be able to turn the tide of this war. Daniel felt a surge of hope, but also caution. This sounded too good to be true. A weapon capable of fighting the Zanari. It was either a miracle or a trap. Either way, it was worth investigating. We'll take it back to the Aurora, he said firmly. And you're coming with us. You're the expert. We'll need your help. Emily hesitated, glancing around at the ruined lab. Finally, she nodded. All right, but we need to move fast. If the mercenaries come back—" "They won't," Daniel interrupted, his tone resolute. "Let's go." As they made their way back to the shuttle, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they'd stumbled onto something bigger than any of them realized. The artifact was a gamble, a dangerous unknown. But in a galaxy where humanity was losing ground every day, it might be their only chance. For the first time in a long while, Daniel allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could fight back. Document, Part 3, The Aurora, hummed with activity as the crew worked to secure the artifact and prepare for their next move. Dr. Emily Blake stood in the center of the ship's small research lab, her hands trembling slightly as she examined the datapad again. The carvings on the fragment glowed faintly under the overhead lights, almost like they were alive. Daniel watched her from the doorway, his arms crossed. "What can you tell us?" he asked, breaking the silence. Emily looked up, her face pale but determined. "This fragment is part of a larger device, something ancient, possibly predating even the Zenari Empire. The inscriptions describe it as a resonator. From what I've pieced together, it was designed to disrupt energy fields. If we can assemble the full device, it might be able to disable the Zenari's advanced technology." Daniel frowned. "How many pieces are there?" Emily hesitated, scrolling through the data on her pad. "At least 3, she said finally. "Maybe more. Each piece seems to correspond to a different function of the resonator. But without all of them, it's useless." "Do you know where the other pieces are?" Rachel asked, leaning against the wall. Her tone was skeptical, but there was a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Emily shook her head. "Not exactly. The records mention coordinates, but they're encoded. It'll take time to decode them, and even then, some might lead to dead ends." "Time is something we don't have," Rachel muttered under her breath. Daniel ignored her comment. "Start working on it," he said to Emily. "We'll do whatever it takes to find the rest of the pieces." As Emily nodded and turned back to her work, Daniel stepped out of the lab and onto the bridge. Noah was already at his station, pulling up maps of nearby star systems. The young navigator's fingers moved quickly over the controls, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I've plotted potential locations based on the artifact's origin point," Noah said, pointing to several blinking dots on the screen. "These sectors match the age and composition of the materials used in the fragment. If the other pieces are still intact, they're probably hidden in one of these areas." Daniel studied the map carefully. Each location was deep in uncharted or hostile territory, places where the Zenari had either claimed dominance or left behind traps for intruders. It wasn't going to be an easy journey. "We'll start with the closest one," Daniel decided. "Set a course." Noah nodded and began entering commands into the navigation system. Meanwhile, Rachel approached, her arms crossed and her expression grim. "You realize this is insane, right?" she said bluntly. "We're risking everything, our lives, the refugees we're supposed to protect, for a weapon that might not even work." "It's a risk," Daniel admitted. "But it's also our best shot. If this resonator can stop the Zenari, it's worth it." Rachel sighed, shaking her head. "I hope you're right, because if this goes sideways, we're not just losing the Aurora, we're losing whatever's left of humanity." Her words hung heavy in the air, but Daniel didn't respond. He knew she was right. This mission could end in disaster. It could change everything. There was no middle ground. Hours later, the Aurora dropped out of hyperspace near the first set of coordinates. The sector was eerily quiet, with only a few distant stars visible through the viewport. The crew scanned the area, searching for any sign of the artifact. "There's something here," Noah announced suddenly, his voice rising with excitement. "A derelict structure, about 10 kilometers off our port side." On the main screen, a jagged shape appeared, a crumbling alien outpost, half buried in an asteroid field. Its surface was pockmarked with craters, and its once gleaming spires were now dull and fractured. Whatever civilization had built, it was long gone. That doesn't look safe, Rachel commented dryly. It's not, Daniel agreed. But, if the second piece is inside, we don't have a choice. The team suited up and boarded the shuttle, descending toward the outpost. As they landed, the ground beneath them shifted slightly, sending a shiver through the craft. When they stepped outside, the air was thick with dust, and the sky above was a swirling mass of red and orange clouds. This place gives me the creeps, one of the security officers muttered, gripping his rifle tightly. Stay alert, Daniel ordered as they approached the entrance. The doors were rusted shut, but Rachel managed to pry them open with a portable plasma cutter. Inside, the corridors were dark and narrow, lined with strange symbols etched into the walls. Emily led the way, her flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. These markings, they match the ones on the fragment, she said, her voice tinged with AW. We're definitely in the right place. They moved deeper into the outpost, navigating collapsed sections and avoiding unstable floors. At one point, they triggered a trap. A section of the ceiling collapsed behind them, sealing off their path back. Daniel clenched his jaw, but kept moving forward. They couldn't afford to turn back now. Finally, they reached a large chamber at the heart of the structure. In the center stood a pedestal, glowing faintly with the same light as the fragment they'd recovered earlier. Resting on top was another piece of the resonator. We found it, Emily whispered, her voice trembling with relief. But before anyone could step closer, the ground began to shake. A low rumble echoed through the chamber, growing louder by the second. From the shadows emerged a group of drones, small insect-like machines with glowing red eyes. Hostiles, one of the security officers shouted, raising his weapon. Don't shoot unless you have to, Daniel ordered. We don't know what these things are capable of. The drones circled the group, their movements jerky and unpredictable. Then, without warning, they lunged. Chaos erupted as the team scrambled to defend themselves. The drones were fast, darting between shots and striking with razor-sharp claws. One of the security officers went down, clutching a wound on his arm. Get the piece, Daniel yelled, firing his pistol at the nearest drone. We need to get out of here. Emily sprinted toward the pedestal, grabbing the resonator fragment just as a drone lunged at her. Rachel tackled it mid-air, smashing it against the wall with her rifle. Sparks flew as the machine sputtered and died. Clear a path, Daniel shouted, leading the way back toward the exit. The remaining drones pursued them relentlessly, forcing the team to fight their way out. By the time they reached the shuttle, everyone was battered and bruised, but they had the second piece. Back on the Aurora, the crew regrouped in the lab. Emily carefully placed the new fragment next to the first, studying how they fit together. A faint hum filled the room as the two pieces connected, forming a partial arc of the resonator. It's working, Emily said, her voice filled with wonder. But we still need at least one more piece to complete it. Daniel nodded, his mind already racing ahead to the next location. Let's keep moving. We're running out of time. As the Aurora prepared to jump to the next set of coordinates, Daniel felt a mix of hope and dread. They were closer to finding a way to fight back, but every step brought them deeper into danger. The galaxy was vast, and the odds were stacked against them. Yet, for the first time in a long while, Daniel allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could win. For now, though, the fight continued, and the Aurora would carry the hopes of humanity, one dangerous leap at a time. Document Part 4. The Aurora raced through hyperspace, its engines groaning under the strain of another long jump. The crew was quiet, each person lost in their own thoughts. No one spoke much after returning from the derelict outpost. The mission had been a success. They'd recovered the second piece of the resonator, but it had come at a cost. One of the security officers, Matt, was injured badly during the fight with the drones. He lay unconscious in the medical bay, his condition stable but critical. The others carried bruises and cuts, reminders of how close they'd come to disaster. On the bridge, Daniel sat in the command chair, staring at the glowing screens before him. His mind replayed the events over and over again: the ambush, the chaos, the narrow escape. Every step forward brought new dangers, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking blind into a storm. Still, there was no turning back now. They had 2 pieces of the resonator, and they needed to find the last one before the Zenari caught wind of what they were doing. "Captain," Noah's voice broke the silence. "We're approaching the next set of coordinates." Daniel nodded, and stood up, stretching his stiff muscles. "Let's see what we're dealing with this time." Noah adjusted the sensors, scanning the area ahead. "It's strange," he said after a moment. "There's a nebula blocking most of our readings. We'll have to go in closer to get a clear picture." Rachel stepped onto the bridge, her arms crossed. She looked tired, her face smudged with grease from another round of engine repairs. "A nebula. That's just great. Those things are full of radiation and gravitational anomalies. If we're not careful, we could lose the ship, or worse." "We don't have a choice," Daniel said firmly. "If the 3rd piece is in there, we need to find it." Rachel sighed but didn't argue. She knew as well as anyone that the stakes were too high to hesitate. "All right," she said, "but I'm keeping an eye on the engines. If anything goes wrong, we're pulling out." The Aurora slowed as it entered the outer edges of the nebula. The view outside the viewport shifted from the cold blackness of space to a swirling mass of colors: reds, purples, and blues blending together like paint on a canvas. It was beautiful, but also dangerous. The ship shuddered slightly as it passed through pockets of dense gas, and warning lights flashed intermittently on the consoles. "This place is a death trap," Rachel muttered, tapping furiously at her panel to stabilize the engines. "It's also hiding something," Emily added, stepping onto the bridge. She held the partially assembled resonator in her hands, its faint glow casting shadows on her face. "The data suggests the final piece is here, somewhere." Daniel turned to her. "Any idea where we should start looking?" Emily hesitated, glancing at her datapad. "The inscriptions mention a core, a central point within the nebula. It might be a star, or some kind of artificial structure. Either way, it's deep inside." "And that's where we're going," Daniel said, without hesitation. "Noah, plot a course for the center. Rachel, keep those engines running." As the Aurora ventured deeper into the nebula, the challenges grew more intense. The ship rocked violently as it navigated through gravitational waves, and bursts of radiation forced the crew to activate the shields at maximum capacity. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, and alarms blared constantly. Despite the chaos, the crew worked together seamlessly, each person focused on their task. Finally, they reached the heart of the nebula. What they found took everyone by surprise. Suspended in the center of the swirling gases was a massive alien-constructed towering spire made of dark, metallic material that seemed to absorb the light around it. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly in patterns that shifted and changed. "That's it," Emily whispered, her voice filled with awe. "The core. The final piece has to be inside." Daniel studied the structure, his jaw tightening. "How do we get in?" Before anyone could answer, the ship's sensors picked up movement. Dozens of small ships emerged from behind the spire, sleek and fast, their weapons locked onto the Aurora. They weren't Zenari, but they weren't friendly either. "Pirates," Rachel growled, recognizing the design of the ships. "They've been using this nebula as a hideout. Can we outrun them?" Daniel asked sharply. "No," Rachel replied grimly. "Not with the engines already strained. If we try to flee, they'll tear us apart." Daniel clenched his fists, his mind racing. Fighting wasn't an option. They were outnumbered and outgunned. But surrendering meant losing the resonator, and possibly their lives. There had to be another way. "Captain," Noah said suddenly, his voice tinged with excitement. I think I can use the nebula's anomalies against them. If I adjust the gravimetric sensors, we might be able to create a diversion, a gravity well that pulls them off course. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You sure about this? I'm not sure about anything, Noah admitted, but it's worth a shot. Do it, Daniel ordered, and prepare a shuttle. We're going in. While Noah worked on creating the diversion, the rest of the team geared up for another risky mission. This time, they'd have to infiltrate the spire while dodging both the pirates and whatever defenses the structure itself might have. As the gravity well formed, the pirate ships were drawn into it, their formations breaking as they struggled to regain control. The Aurora slipped past unnoticed, landing near the base of the spire. Inside, the air was cold and heavy, the walls lined with the same shifting symbols as the exterior. The team moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty halls. Emily led the way, her eyes scanning the carvings for clues. The final piece is close, she said finally, stopping in front of a large door sealed with intricate locks. These symbols, it's a puzzle. We need to solve it to open the door. How long will it take? Daniel asked, glancing over his shoulder. Time was running out. I don't know, Emily admitted, but I'll work as fast as I can. As Emily deciphered the puzzle, the others kept watch, their weapons ready. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional hum of energy coursing through the walls. Finally, after what felt like hours, the door slid open with a low rumble. Inside was a chamber bathed in soft, golden light. Floating in the center was the final piece of the resonator, glowing brighter than the others. Emily stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached out to take it. The moment her fingers touched the fragment, the entire spire began to shake. We need to go, Daniel shouted, grabbing Emily's arm. Now, the team sprinted back, toward the shuttle, the spire collapsing around them. Pieces of the ceiling fell, narrowly missing them as they ran. By the time they reached the Aurora, the ship was already powering up, ready to make a quick escape. Get us out of here, Daniel yelled as they boarded. Noah didn't need to be told twice. The Aurora surged forward, leaving the spire and the pirates behind. As they cleared the nebula, the crew let out a collective sigh of relief. They had done it. They had. All three pieces of the resonator in the lab. Emily carefully assembled the fragments, fitting them together until the device was whole. A low hum filled the room, growing louder as the resonator activated. Its glow pulsed steadily, like a heartbeat. It's ready, Emily said softly, her voice filled with both hope and fear. This could change everything. Daniel nodded, his expression grim. Or it could get us killed. Either way, we're not done yet. The galaxy was still vast, and the Zanari were still out there. But for the first time in a long while, the crew of the Aurora felt like they had a chance to fight back, a chance to stand their ground, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to survive. Document, Part 5. The Aurora drifted silently in the shadow of a gas giant, its crew catching their breath after the harrowing escape from the nebula. The resonator sat on a table in the lab, glowing faintly, as if it were alive. For the first time since they began this journey, there was a sense of hope aboard the ship, but it was fragile, like a flame struggling to stay lit in a storm. Daniel stood on the bridge, staring out at the swirling clouds of the planet below. His mind raced with questions. How would they use the resonator? Where should they strike first? Could it really disable the Zanari's technology? Or was it all just wishful thinking? He clenched his fists, trying to push away the doubts that gnawed at him. Captain, Rachel said, stepping onto the bridge. Her voice was calm but firm. We've got company. Daniel turned sharply. What do you mean? Rachel gestured toward the main screen, where several blips had appeared. Another ship just dropped out of hyperspace. It's human. Noah adjusted the sensors, pulling up more details. It's the Eclipse. Commander Alan Foster is in charge. Daniel's jaw tightened. He knew Alan Foster, or, at least, he knew of him. Foster was a man who believed in survival at any cost, even if it meant making deals with the enemy. Rumors said he'd been negotiating with the Zenari, trading information for safe passage. Daniel didn't trust him. "Hail them," Daniel ordered. The communications panel crackled to life, and soon Foster's face appeared on the screen. He was a tall man, with sharp features and cold eyes, his uniform immaculate despite the chaos of the war. A sly smile spread across his face when he saw Daniel. Well, Foster said, his voice smooth and mocking. "If it isn't Captain Hayes, I heard you'd gone rogue. Looks like the rumors are true. What do you want, Foster?" Daniel asked, cutting straight to the point. Foster chuckled. "Straight to business, huh? Fine, I'll make this quick. Word is, you've been scavenging ancient artifacts. Dangerous work, especially for someone with a ship as outdated as yours." Daniel's expression didn't change. "We're doing what we have to do to survive." "Survive," Foster repeated, leaning forward slightly. "You call this surviving? Running around like rats while the Zenari burn everything behind you? There's another way, Hayes. You just need to be smart about it." Rachel stepped closer to Daniel, her hand resting on her sidearm. "He's fishing," she muttered under her breath. Daniel ignored her for now. "What are you talking about, Foster?" "I'm talking about power," Foster replied. "The Zenari aren't unbeatable. They're just better organized than us. If we play our cards right, we can carve out a place for ourselves. Humanity doesn't have to lose this war, we just need to adapt." "And what does that mean?" Daniel asked, his tone icy. "It means joining forces," Foster said. "Hand over whatever artifact you've found, and I'll see to it that you and your crew are taken care of. Safe zones, supplies, protection, you name it. All you have to do is cooperate." Daniel felt a surge of anger, but kept his voice steady. "And if I refuse?" Foster's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold calculation. "Then I'll take it from you, one way or another." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Noah glanced nervously between Daniel and Rachel. "What do we do now?" "We don't give him anything," Rachel said firmly. "That resonator is our only chance to fight back. If Foster gets his hands on it, he'll sell it to the Zenari or, worse." Daniel nodded. "Agreed, but we can't let him board us. Either prepare the ship for evasive maneuvers. Noah, plot a course out of here." As the crew sprang into action, Emily entered the bridge, her face pale. "What's going on?" I heard shouting. "The eclipse is here," Daniel explained quickly. "They know about the resonator, and they want it." Emily's eyes widened. "But if they get it, they won't," Daniel interrupted. "Not while I'm still breathing." The Aurora's engines roared to life as it broke away from the gas giant, heading toward open space. Behind them, the Eclipse gave chase, its larger frame dwarfing the smaller frigate. Foster wasn't wasting time. He launched fighters, almost immediately, sending them swarming toward the Aurora. "Incoming," Noah shouted, his fingers flying over the controls. 3 fighters closing fast. "Activate turrets," Daniel barked. "Rachel, reinforce the shields." The ship rocked violently as energy blasts struck the hull. Alarms blared, and sparks flew from overloaded circuits. On the lower decks, the crew scrambled to keep systems online. Despite the chaos, everyone worked together, their movements precise and determined. "Fighters are targeting our engines," Rachel yelled, slamming her fist against the console. "If they hit us again, we're dead in the water." "Not today," Daniel growled. "Noah, lead them into the asteroid field ahead. We'll lose them there." Noah nodded, adjusting the course. The Aurora veered sharply, weaving through a dense cluster of rocks. The fighters followed, their pilots forced to slow down to avoid collisions. One by one, they fell victim to The asteroids, or the Aurora S turrets. Their explosions lighting up the darkness, but the eclipse itself remained undeterred, its massive bulk plowing through the debris with ease. Foster's voice crackled over the comms. You can run, Hayes, but you can't hide forever. Hand over the resonator, or I'll tear your ship apart piece by piece. Daniel ignored him, focusing instead on the task at hand. Rachel, how are the shields holding? Barely, she replied, her voice tight. One more hit like that last one, and we're done. Then we'll have to take the fight to them. Daniel turned to Emily. Is the resonator ready? Emily hesitated, glancing at the device. I think so. But using it now it's risky. We don't fully understand how it works. We don't have a choice, Daniel said. If we don't stop Foster, he'll hand the resonator over to the Zanari. Do whatever you need to do. Emily nodded and hurried back to the lab, her hands trembling as she made final adjustments. Meanwhile, Daniel formulated a plan. Noah, bring us around. Head straight for the eclipse. Noah stared at him in disbelief. Are you serious? That thing will crush us. Trust me, Daniel said. Just follow my lead. The Aurora swung around, accelerating directly toward the much larger ship. Foster's voice came through the comms again, tinged with amusement. What's this? A suicide run? How noble. As the two ships closed the distance, Emily rushed back onto the bridge, carrying the resonator. It's ready, she said breathlessly. But we need to get close enough for it to affect their systems. Daniel clenched his teeth. How? Close, within 500 meters. That's insane, Rachel protested. Their weapons will tear us apart before we even get there. We don't have a choice, Daniel repeated. Hold on tight. The Aurora surged forward, dodging fire from the Eclipse's cannons. Explosions rocked the ship, throwing the crew off balance. Sparks rained down from the ceiling, and warning lights flashed furiously, but somehow, they kept moving, inching closer to the enemy vessel. 400 meters. Noah shouted, his voice strained. Keep going, Daniel yelled. 300. Rachel gripped the edge of her console, her knuckles white. We're not going to make it. 200. Now Emily. Daniel commanded. Emily activated the resonator, its glow intensifying until it filled the entire ship. A low hum reverberated through the air, growing louder and louder. Then, suddenly, the Eclipse's weapons went silent. Its engines sputtered, and the massive ship began to drift, powerless. What did you do? Rachel asked, staring at the screen in disbelief. I disrupted their systems, Emily said, her voice shaking. It worked, but it might not last long. Good enough, Daniel said. Get us out of here. The Aurora turned and fled, leaving the disabled Eclipse behind. As they put distance between themselves and the enemy ship, the crew finally allowed themselves to breathe. That was too close, Rachel muttered, collapsing into a chair. Way too close. Daniel nodded, his expression grim. Foster won't forget this. Next time, he'll come harder. But we held our ground, Emily said softly. For once, we didn't run. Daniel looked at her, then at the rest of the crew. They were battered and exhausted. But there was a spark of determination in their eyes, a belief that maybe, just maybe, they could win. For now, that's enough, Daniel said quietly. Let's regroup and figure out our next move. We've got a galaxy to save. And with that, the Aurora disappeared into the stars, carrying the hopes of humanity and the promise of defiance into the unknown.